The grafted apple trees in the last video showed how the first transplants, skin grafts, were more or less human versions of the kinds of operations that people have performed on trees for millennia. Our second object is a quill, which is something that 17th century experimenters used to inject blood and other substances into the body. William Harvey identified the circulatory system in 1624, and it was just a few decades later, in the 1650s, that a group of scientists who were all inspired by Harvey, some of them knew him personally, were using porcupine quills like this. They also used goose quills to inject various substances into this newly discovered bloodstream. These scientists met up at each other's lodgings and they tried injecting different fluids into dogs just to see what would happen. And they did this by putting the fluid into a bladder, attaching that to a quill, and then squeezing the bladder, and the liquid would squirt down the quill straight into a blood vessel. So they made a kind of a primitive syringe. So they tried injecting the dogs with different drugs and alcohol, and they found that not only did the dogs get high and drunk, they got higher and drunker than they would have done if they'd just eaten the drugs or drank the alcohol. By the 1660s, a new member of this group, Richard Lower, tried to feed dogs by injecting milk into them. It didn't work. Of course it didn't work. The dogs died because the milk would curdle with the blood. But it was this that prompted Lower to try feeding a dog by blood transfusion. The idea was that if another dog did the digesting, the milk wouldn't curdle, and the recipient dog would get the benefit of food that had already been digested. But since blood coagulated easily outside of a body, this required a different set of equipment. Experimenters, they ended up using tubes and pipes of various kinds. The use of quills like this in the history of transplants, it was very short-lived. But they were nevertheless the first substitute blood vessels, the first mechanical substitute for a body part.